Welcome to the Autistic Mile. I'm your host, Jim Gaffney. Today I'm lucky enough to be joined by Jeaneen Tang, a speech and language pathologist. Jeaneen is also the author of a book, Play Dumb and Sabotage, mindfully anticipating the child's needs and creating opportunities to practice language. That's a mouthful, Jeaneen. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, Jeaneen, tell me a little bit on how you got on this path. I mean, what made you decide you wanted to author a book on this subject?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been doing speech therapy for a quarter of a century, 25 years, a long time. And I thought, what better way to duplicate myself than to write a book? Because then I can put it into a book, people can read it, they can apply it instead of, me being able to help one person at a time or a family at a time. I think writing a book would be able to create a greater impact here and around the world. I'm in Los Angeles, but I can, influence somebody across a nation, across another country. And I think by writing a book, it makes it tangible for someone to read the words that I would be able to work with them on, like understand the strategies and then apply them.
Yeah, that's good. When I wrote my first book back in 2016, which is actually funny enough, it was a book about running. It wasn't even about autism. I wrote my book, Hello, I Am Jim, in 2018. And I found through that process, I had just been diagnosed with autism. So I was 48 at that point. So again, being able to share the story, you never know who's going to pick up that book or, get a copy, read it online. So the only way you can kind of reach people is to kind of put it down and get it out there. So that's that's the easiest way. So you never know who's going to pick it up. If we've, I mean, I'm sure you've had people from around the world read your book. So that's with technology, that's a great point that it's not just local. It could be national, it could be international. So that's really good. Tell me a little bit about yourself. I know you're a mother, so you have a child. Tell me a little bit about you and your background, and share some information on that with us.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Honolulu, Hawaii, and I moved here in 2005 because I wanted to do acting. But thankfully, I was already a speech therapist since 2001 because waitressing and trying to do acting, I was working way too many hours. So I was like, let me get my license in California. And I worked in the schools in Hawaii for 4 years and in the schools here in Los Angeles for 4 years. And then I switched over to early intervention and I also work with adults in hospitals. So I kind of worked like the whole gamut of ages, right? From kind of birth all the way until, end of life kind of thing. And I had my son in 2012, and thankfully I was already working in early intervention, which is 0 to 3 years old. So I knew the kind of therapies that were out there and what and how important it was, right, to get therapy early. And unfortunately, my son had a fall from our bed, and it was only 18 inches off the ground, but the way he fell was perfect to give him a large brain bleed. And he had to have an emergency craniotomy. And a few days later, he had swelling in his brain that caused a stroke. So he had a lot of damage on the left side of his brain, which is our language center. And the doctors said he might never walk or talk, right? They have to give you the
Really?
worst case scenario because his injury was so bad.
Hmm.
And now he's 13 and he's going to enter 8th grade. And even though he does have right side hemiplegia, he doesn't really use his right arm or hand functionally. He is able to run, he's able to jump and climb. He has some balance issues with his right leg and agility issues. He's verbal, which is amazing when you think about where his damage in the brain was. And
Right.
I think it just really speaks to the neuroplasticity, right? Your brain will be able to change and form different pathways if you give it enough stimulus, right? You want to train it. And he is very verbal. I have him doing Duolingo every day, and he's on a 72-day streak. He's very proud of that. He's doing Spanish and French and,
Wow.
like little things like that where I'm seeing him develop. makes me, a better parent because I know how resilient he is, and I need to be as resilient and, you know, and mindful as he is every day. And it also made me a better therapist because, before I had my son, I saw speech therapy and the way you interact with children or people in one specific point of view, right?
Hmm.
And then you have a child, and then you're like, well, I used to be like, well, my child's never going to watch an iPad, at a restaurant. And then I have a child. I'm like, no, 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 I need an iPad so I can actually eat my food, And then you have a child with special needs, right? And then I worked with children with special needs, and at the beginning of my career, I would see these parents and they were so stressed, they were tired, and they had these children with special needs. And I was just like, oh, I could never be a parent with special needs because I saw how much work it took, right? And then I became a parent with a special needs child. And I just gained so much more empathy and understanding and perspective from that experience that it became kind of my superpower. I can gain the rapport of parents so much better and faster because, they might say, well, you don't know what I'm going through. And I can say, well, I know exactly what you're going through and maybe worse in some ways,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, absolutely.
Shared experiences. I mean, it's that's something you can't replace when you know. And you said you didn't think you could be the parent of a special needs child. None of us know that we can until it happens, and then we are, and we do it, and most of us do it pretty well. It's just it's not something that we think about. It's just automatic. It's our child. We have to. We have to take care of them. So it's instinctual, and communication. I mean, that's the foundation of all that we are. I mean, it's a basis on how we engage the world around us, and there's really nothing more important. And communication has come a long way. And you say your son he can speak multiple languages. I took 3 years of Spanish in high school, and I can't even speak a complete sentence in Spanish. So um, our brains are wired
He's
differently.
learning.
Well, yeah, but that's good. I
Yeah.
that didn't take from me. But you mentioned, that the brain will compensate. You talked about finding different pathways. It's funny how the brain learns how to compensate for certain things. There's certain things that it may not be able to compensate so well for. But you talk about finding a different path. That's a good analogy there because when there's a will, there's a way, and our physiology, our brain, our bodies. Uh, they work in mysterious ways. Just because you think somebody should not be able to do something because of the extent of their disability, their injury, and then they surprise you, that's got to be great. And the fact that you're able to relate to parents that way. There's a lot of people that work with disabled and autistic children. They know them, they understand them, but and they may understand the parents to a degree. But until you actually walk that path yourself, you can't have complete understanding. There's just no way you can. It's just you're not living it. You see it. It's happening around you. It's not happening to you. And that's not to take anything away from caregivers, anybody that don't live with it at that level. It's just it's hard to understand it to that degree unless you actually live in that with that situation. So.
I completely agree.
So, acting, you got, and I saw that. I thought that was an interesting footnote there. How'd you get into acting? Was that something you wanted to pursue all along? Was that,
Well, I did performance speech in high school and college, and I really liked performing in a sense, right? I did like lip sync contests in elementary school and stuff like that. But um, I actually, after a breakup in my 20s, I was like, I think I'm going to do something artistic. And so I was like, I'm going to take an acting class. And I was taking acting in my mid 20s and I really fell in love with that. It was great. And I've done a few plays like in Hawaii and since I moved to Los Angeles, I've done some plays here as well and some film and television, small roles, nothing big. But I really did enjoy the performance part of it. But I knew that wasn't like what my mom would probably want me to do. So I did speech therapy and that was my profession. That was my job. But then I was like, well, if I don't try the acting, will I regret it later on? Right. So I told my mom, I'm going to try acting. I'm going to move away to Los Angeles. And I thought she was going to lose her mind. But she was actually very encouraging, which was surprising to me, being like a Chinese Asian mother. She wanted me to just try it. And I did. And I still act every now and then. And when things come up, I'll do projects, but it's not my main focus, but it's something that I think I will continue to do until I'm older because it is a love, it is an art, and I think it falls into the same family of like language, right? You get to perform with the kids or perform with, even when I'm working with adults, I have to, in a sense, be more animated so they can participate better. If you have
Yeah.
just a dry therapist, it's like no fun. But if you include fun into the therapy, it makes it more meaningful for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I may have to keep you on my speed dial because we're developing a show called Outside the Box Live, and where it's mainly focused on team building and neurodiversity in the workplace, and trying to cultivate understanding. We can adapt it to do that show in schools and colleges. It doesn't have to be in a corporate setting. I have said before that the autistic children of today are the autistic adults of tomorrow. A lot of these children are going to enter the workforce, so the number of autistic children and adults in the workforce is going to continue to grow. So a lot of these companies now may have policies, they may have certain programs in place. We want to continue to kind of foster that and realize that whatever we're doing today, we need to do a lot more tomorrow because the numbers are going to keep growing. And it's important to not only hire these individuals because they bring their own individual talents, but also have an environment that's inclusive for them. Think about some of the things that you wouldn't normally think about in a work setting. How is this set up? Is it sensory friendly? Are there outlets for them? Are there groups that are supporting them within the company? So the live show that we're working on, that's going to be something that we're trying to bring to corporate America and other institutions as well and other groups. But it is it's with that in mind. But it's not natural for me. I'm not an actor. Even a podcast is not a natural setting for me. I've had to get more comfortable with it over time. But I may have to keep you on my speed dial. I may need some pointers.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
And we want to stress the positive. We want to make sure that's why it's not just about neurodiversity. It's about team building. So it's not just about speaking on terms of autism. It's about building a team. Whether you have neurodiverse individuals on there, or you have you don't. There are other groups that get included in that. And so I think from a team building perspective, it's important that we focus on certain things. Although it weighs more heavily on neurodiversity. It's meant to be fun and engaging, and that's something we're working on. So, yeah, keep that number open for me. I may have to you and I are going to talk again. Your book, Play Dumb and Sabotage. Tell me where did you derive meaning from that? What was your motivation in naming your book that?
Yeah, I've been using that term play dumb and sabotage probably throughout my career, and I don't know exactly where it came from, but what it means is that, oftentimes there's a couple different meanings, right? So kids love being smarter than us, right? And if we ask children questions, we often can build better rapport and get more of a response if we might ask like a absurd question, right? If we say like, "Oh, does a sheep say ruff ruff?" They go, "No," or if you pretend like you are asking like, "Where did the dog go?" And you were like, "Did it go here? Did it go there?" And they're like, "It's right there in front of you." So if
Yeah.
you play dumb, you get this better rapport, you get this more lively response from the kids. And also as parents, especially, first time parents, especially, you don't want to have your child need or want anything because you want to be a good parent. You want to make sure that they are warm or cool and they're fed and they're dry and they have toys and all these things. So by over anticipating what these children need, then we are actually doing too much for them in a sense. We're often providing everything for them, and that child doesn't get to interact with their environment naturally. They don't get to experiment with what's going on, on their plate or on in their environment, like what can they grab or reach for rather than something's already provided for me. And then
Right.
the sabotage part is really just about practice and repetition, right? So you want to create these opportunities to practice a conversational exchange. When I say conversational exchange, I think about more of, like if you're asking for a snack, instead of giving the whole bowl of goldfish, give a few pieces, but have the rest of the bowl in sight but out of reach. So then that conversational exchange is either reaching for that bowl or pointing to it or signing for more or
Hmm.
saying more or more goldfish or I want more goldfish, please. All of that is conversational exchanges. And that's all repetition. And then that way the child can reach mastery, right? Another thing for sabotage would be, creating an environment where you are helping to elicit language or to promote language. So if you have their toy that they love in sight but out of reach, then you can see if they're going to reach for it or point to it. And then you can have that exchange like, oh, what did you want? Oh, you want that? Oh, you want the bear? Then you can work on bear, please. I want bear. And then you can create these opportunities where you're just, having this natural kind of exchange rather than say this, do this, and have this kind of teacher student kind of thing. And another thing I love to play dumb with is like when I would dress my son, I would put his shorts on my head and I'd be like, is that where it goes? And then he'll look at me like, no. So you try to do things that are really silly and absurd to kind of build that rapport, make that interaction fun. And then when you're making it fun, it's more meaningful and memorable.
Yeah, I agree. In how many, as far as I don't even want to say percentage wise, but augmentative and alternative communication devices are uh, they're very good tools now. Do a lot of your patients use the alternate devices, or you try to steer them toward is a matter of question of ability at that point?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into determining whether an AAC, an alternative augmentative communication system, is appropriate for a child, right? So I have a child with apraxia of speech right now, and he understands everything. He can point to different pictures. He can follow directions. He just cannot. So the apraxia is his brain wants to say something, but his mouth is not able to make those exact sounds, right?
Right, right.
But what's impacting his ability to use like I tried an iPad, a tablet kind of AAC. His attention, his hyperactivity is impacting his ability to use it appropriately because he just wants to hit everything. And so we're going
Hmm.
to go to more of like a pointing board or a picture exchange, something really low tech, so he can have a limited amount of choices, but be more exact in his communication.
Yeah, well, there
Um,
are different tools, obviously, and some serve certain children better than others. So,
Absolutely. But I think I have used a lot of AACs over the years, but it's really determined by the child's ability to, scan and understand what to press, or to exchange or to point to. I try to, as much as possible, if they can do signs or verbal, that's the ideal for me. But I definitely think that there is a place for AACs. But if a child is nonverbal, but they're able to use the AAC, I think that's great. But if a child does have some verbal, I like to have, some try to lean on the verbal, but use the AAC if necessary.
yeah, I think. I mean, it's funny when you see the mind working, because I mean, kids around the clinic where they come in, they'll come and they'll practice speaking to me or somebody else that maybe they're not interacting with all day long, and it's good practice for them. And a lot of the children that even though they use those devices, they know exactly what they want to say, but they're unable to process that. But they know exactly what they want to tell you. It's it's amazing. It's really we may see them in certain circumstances or certain settings and think we may form a short-term opinion of them based on such a limited amount of data. But when you're around these kids often, you realize how much how much thought is going on up there. It really um, we want to think they're less sometimes, but they really are smart. They're very cute. I had somebody come up. Somebody came into me one day and kept hitting the ham sandwich button. And I was like, he really did want a ham sandwich. He knew exactly what he wanted. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't like he really wanted a ham sandwich. And at the time, I thought that was so specific. I thought, my thought at that time was it must have been an error. Is he must want something else. But that he was messing with me. But he really didn't want a ham sandwich. I think whatever tools we have available, whether it's signing, whether it's an AAC device, or whether it's high tech or low tech, high tech, we have so many alternatives now. We have so many things that we can use to communicate. It's a good time, for people on the spectrum because they have these devices if they need them, where before they may have been limited to more low tech alternatives. So it's funny when you talk about helping a child or not helping them and make them do more of the work themselves. Because I've spoken to this with people over the years about my experience. My son was diagnosed with autism before he started kindergarten. He's an adult now. So with that diagnosis at such a young age, he had a lot of support there, and he had his as a late diagnosed adult, for myself being diagnosed later in life, our experiences were very different. He had all the support he needed, but again, there were times that I felt maybe we helped him with too much or did too much for him, because I don't mean that in a bad way. It sounds terrible to say as a father, but to help your child too much in certain circumstances, I think it applies. But I draw on my own experience. Although most people, most late diagnosed autistic adults will tell you they had a difficult childhood. Life's always been difficult. We don't go around crying about it, but we had to develop our own skill sets, our own tools to be able to navigate the world around us, communicate, and those experiences help shape us, and they make us into who I am. So they make us into who we are. So we develop those skills, and sometimes there's so much understanding now. It can sometimes you think make somebody a little lazy because we're going to do it for them, or as a parent, you're anticipating their needs and you may want to answer for them or tell them to do this and not that instead of letting them figure it out. So, yeah, that you're spot on. Whether it pertains to speech or some other aspect of your life, doing too much for somebody is not a good thing. So, uh, so your son's 13, going into high school. That has to be a nervous time for you. I know, as children get older, children with any kind of disability, the older they get, the more we worry because it's always in the back of our mind. Are they going to require extended care? Are they going to be able to navigate the world around them? What is going to be their level of independence? As a mother, as a parent, what are your thoughts as your child's going into high school here?
Yeah, well, he's going into eighth grade, so we have one more year till high school, but
Okay.
it's coming up fast. And I think one of the biggest worries I have of him, after eighth grade, going into high school is, the large school sizes and who he is going to interact with, or maybe get bullied or teased or have a difficult time making friends. And Los Angeles is so big, and he goes to a charter school, and I feel like he doesn't have a lot of really close friends in school, and it's really hard to have a really good supportive friend circle. So I think when he goes to high school, that's going to be one of my biggest fears. And he does have seizures. He has these these reflexive focal tonic seizures, which they're like called startle response seizures. So if someone slams a door or drops a water bottle or he gets bumped into unknowingly or he trips, he'll have a seizure. And so, I want to make sure that when he transitions to high school, he has an adult that supports him, right? A one-on-one adult throughout his day right now. And I want to make sure that he has one in place in high school that's, very aware of how my son is able to, function throughout the day and what he needs help with and what he doesn't need help with. And um, yeah, I don't even want to think about after high school yet, but that's going to come up so quick. And, even though, I encourage parents to step back and let children figure it out, a lot of times as a parent of a disabled child, it's like I do want to make sure that his needs are met, that he can put his clothes on by himself, but when we're on a time constraint, I need to help him, or when he's doing something like, even toileting, they're like, do you allow him to wipe his own butt? And I'm like, I want to make sure he doesn't get poop on his hands. So I
Right.
wipe his butt. But then sometimes he's done it. And I'm like, okay, you actually did a good job, but let's wash your hands again just in case. So there are things that I, as a parent myself, need to step back on and allow him to make those mistakes and grow. And, going from middle school to high school is going to be such a big jump. And it makes me anxious, but I know that he will thrive. He'll probably do better than I will when he enters high school, honestly.
We'll see. The world is his oyster, right? Um, Tell me, in your opinion, some of the unintentional things that we do that well-meaning, but some of the more common things that parents or caregivers do that maybe we should be allowing our kids to do for ourselves. What are some of the more common unintentional things that we're doing that we should try to stay away from a little bit or not lean so heavily on?
Yeah. One thing that popped into my head was, you know, in a sense, we are helping kids when we're saying, okay, it's time to do your homework, it's time to have dinner and do all these things. But when we are telling them, like, oh, we're going to have dinner soon, we often say, are you ready to have dinner? Are you ready to do your homework? Can you clean up your room? Can you do this and that? And we're asking these yes, no questions, and we're expecting them to do the task or the activity that we're talking about, whether they say yes or no, right? But we're not actually listening to their no. So oftentimes when a kid says, oh, I'm not ready to do my homework, they're like, well, you're going to do it anyway. Or, it's time, are you ready to have dinner? Like, no, well, we're going to eat anyway. Are you ready to go to bed? No, well, you're going to go to sleep anyway. We're asking all these questions and we're guiding them throughout their day, but we're actually not honoring what their response is. So I think in a sense, we really need to step back from asking yes, no questions unless we're actually ready to honor the no. So as parents and teachers, educators, I feel like we ask a lot of yes, no questions and expect the child, it's almost like a rhetorical question, right? So, like, are you ready to clean up your room or are you ready to eat dinner? It isn't like we really want to know a yes, no. We're saying we're going to do this, but we're asking a yes, no question. And by doing that and not responding appropriately when they do say no or have a disagreement about that, I think that's really important to honor their no. So offering choices, I think, is really great for whether it's snack time, dinner time. For my son, if I say, your nails are getting long, we need to cut them. Do you want to do it today or tomorrow? Right? He'll always pick tomorrow, but I've given him a choice and I've given him that power. He feels he has some autonomy. He's made a decision, and then we're going to honor that decision. So allowing kids to have some autonomy and make some decisions about what they want to do or what they need to do and what their schedule might be, I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's those are all good points. We always mean well, but sometimes we can overdo it. Um, one of the one of the things that I've always struggled with my son is anticipation, trying to explain to him anticipating certain things. You know, he's so used to routine. If we do something every Saturday, every Sunday, and we do a certain way, um, and then one weekend maybe something changes in the schedule where uh, we still have to do those same things, but maybe because I'm usually the one that does part of it and he's usually the one that does part of it, he's anticipating that no matter what my timing is, I'm in charge. I should be doing this, and he won't actually do that because those are tasks that he associates with me, not anticipating that, okay, well, dad's doing something else. He can't do this right now, but I know it needs to be done. So I will do it. And I'm anticipating it needs to be done instead of, okay, I come out a half hour later and now it's like, okay, now I'm going to do it. And now it's just setting us back even further. It's, um, it's challenging to because we're all creatures of habit, and I think but again it goes back to development, the way we both developed as for myself, even in school he had a lot of, although he was very functional and he didn't need a lot of help. He still in school, I think teachers and staff, they tended to help him a little bit too much. He had accommodations, so he was afforded certain opportunities. So for myself growing up in a different time and a different place, I had to anticipate what was, and I saw. I want to say I almost saw the world through a lens of fear at that point. I was trying to anticipate so that I could be prepared for something. So it taught me to look ahead, and not just in the next 5 minutes, but the next hour, or even tomorrow. I became a worrier about tomorrow or the next day. And so it taught me to anticipate, and that is a skill that is it's hard to teach. If you don't develop on your own, it's very difficult to teach.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times as parents, especially parents with a child with special needs, or just parents in general, we often will plan the day or the week for that child, but not really let the child know ahead of time, like what things are going to be happening or if things change, right? And so, like for my son, we have a monthly calendar on the wall, and I put the different activities that he's going to be doing or we're going to be doing, and I'll put the time and everything so he can kind of keep an eye on the schedule, you know? And if there's a change, then I will let him know, like, this isn't going to happen because of such and such. And when he was little, since he was little, I would sequence our day, like, we're going to eat breakfast, we're going to brush our teeth, and then we're going to go to the zoo, and then we're going to go to the store. After that, then we would review, like, what did we do? And then as he was getting older, and the days would get a little bit more full of activities, I could add more steps, and then he would remember things, right? And if I forgot a step, he'd be like, Mom, you forgot that we needed to do such and such. So it helped him sequence his day. It helped him anticipate what was going to happen. And I think, like when he goes to school, his one-on-one is like, you know, my son learns the schedule, his schedule, like what classes are in which period and with which teacher. He learns that very quickly. And I think that's really important for kids to be able to do, is to like know what their schedule is and to know, like you said, anticipate if there's going to be a change, what could possibly happen. And we as parents and teachers, educators, we need to be able to let the child know ahead of time if there's going to be a change, because, especially with children on the spectrum, they don't like change. I don't like change myself. And if people tell me at the last minute that this big plan that I thought we were going to do is no longer happening, I'm going to be a little, upset about that. I'm like, well, I thought we were going to do this. Why aren't we doing that? So I think we need to also teach anticipation. And I think, you're about my age, and I remember a student that was in the grade above me. And in hindsight, he's definitely on the spectrum as far as he got one wrong on his SAT. he wrote an alma mater for our school. He got into MIT and all these other schools, but he ended up going to the University of Hawaii and quadruple majored because
Oh my
he wanted
goodness.
to quadruple major. But like looking in hindsight, he didn't have any accommodations in high school when I saw him, but he definitely was displaying, characteristics of somebody who would fall under ASD now. But I think back then, when we were growing up, there wasn't a huge diagnosis of autism. I've never heard of autism growing up. But now being a speech therapist, I've worked with children with autism or people with autism throughout my career. And I guess there's more diagnoses because we're more aware, right? We understand it better. There are more people now. So there seems to be, an uptick on diagnoses of ASD, and it's a very different time than when we grew up. Like,
Yeah, yeah, it is.
absolutely.
And it made it more difficult back then because people like myself that were diagnosed later in life, we did our best we didn't know what we were hiding, but we were hiding something. Every day it became an exercise. Masking is a big term with autism. We learned to mask our deficiencies. We learned to hide what the world didn't want to see from us. So it made it more difficult to diagnose somebody. I mean, you can't diagnose somebody if they're not being honest with you. Growing up, my parents brought me to all kinds of specialists. I had 1 year in grammar school. I always detested school. I was not a good student. I was a good learner, but I learned well in certain settings. On the job, I'm a visual learner, so there were certain environments that I excelled in, but school was not one of them. Learning was difficult in a classroom setting, and testing. I deplored testing. 1 year on the standardized testing, the ones where you fill in the dots. I decided I was just going to fill it in randomly, the whole thing. I just, I didn't make it that obvious. It wasn't like I didn't just fill it in and sat there with my hands folded, but, I deliberately, that was a choice that I made. Oh, the repercussions from that one event. I mean, they, I mean, uh, I was never below average as a student. I just didn't learn well. I wasn't. It wasn't a lack of intelligence. It was there was a lot of laziness there. But I remember seeing a couple of specialists after that, just based on the test results. It's like, how could you score that low? But that was intentional, that was an experience because my own actions led to a negative outcome. Okay, so I made a choice to proceed with the testing in this matter, and now I was forced to go to see specialists. Because they were questioning my intelligence. So again, that was one of my that was one of the early reinforcements that I had, that I have to learn to hide this better. you know, and it's not usually, we just don't stand in the mirror going, okay, Jim, well, now you got to hide it better. It's not, it's a subconscious thing. It happens. And once it happens, it's hard to switch. It just doesn't switch off. You go through life that way. You're, you're responding to the feedback that you're getting from society, and you're learning. We're all learning as we go along, but for autistic individuals, or people that have trouble communicating, it's more difficult. That challenge. We're presenting the world with the version of us that we want the world to see, and that makes it difficult to diagnose us because we're hiding it. We're hiding it as best we can. We didn't know what we were hiding at the time, and now there's not a need to hide it. Now there's much more understanding and acceptance. So thank God we live in a world where children of today don't have to go through that same experience. They may still experience some of the unpleasantness, bullying, and there's always going to be things that happen that are associated in both worlds. But as far as the masking goes, we we're not asking them to do that. It's not a requirement for them. They still may do it to a small extent. I hope not. Uh, um, but it's just it's we learn over time, so that made it. And again, now there's more. they broaden the definition of who falls under the autism spectrum. We have ADHD, we have other diagnosis codes that fall in that under the spectrum now. So they've broadened the definition. You have more kids displaying these, with population growth. So there's a lot more people that fall in that bucket. And again, depends on where they are on the spectrum on their functionality. But I think for the most part, we're doing a great job today. I have to applaud society to a certain degree, because we are aware of autism. We're aware of speech problems. We're aware of things that we weren't so aware of, and we're making improvements in those areas. But again, as the numbers continue to increase, we're going to have to increase the focus on uh, not only the children of today, but the adults of tomorrow. And one of the reasons I asked you the question about eighth grade and going into high school and that transition there, as these children start to age out, and I've seen it with my own son, as they age out of the system, so to speak, out of their school years, and then they become official adults. And a lot of those things, a lot of those support structures fall by the wayside, and that can be a nightmare for parents, especially if depending on if they do require extensive care. There's a lot these parents are carrying around. There's a lot they're dealing with, and we see these people in the workplace. And sometimes they may not have autism, but they have a child that has autism. Their stress level, everything is because their child's life is more difficult. Their life is more difficult. And we talked about on our last podcast episode, these people are carrying a lot of weight around. It just makes it different, but it makes it difficult. But as society, we are doing the right thing. We're moving in the right direction. But for people like yourself and myself, we need to continue our advocacy and pushing for more, because more is still needed. We can't just throw up a victory flag yet. We have to. We always have to. We always have to keep working at it. Any final thoughts you have? I know we discussed a lot today. Is there anything for parents or caregivers or teachers? Any words of wisdom before we wrap it up here?
Yeah, I would say never be afraid to ask for help, because there are individuals who like myself, a speech therapist, or professionals that can help your child, right? There's also other parents like yourself that can give perspective and experience with having a child with special needs, whether it's autism or something else. And don't be afraid that someone's going to judge you as a parent based on your child's diagnosis, because our ego sometimes will get in the way of reaching out for help, because we want to be good parents and we don't want to be judged. And you have to understand that the earlier that you ask for help, the more help you're going to be able to provide for your child, and that's who you really need to focus on. So don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, that's no, those words definitely resonate. I think, and I've been guilty of it at times as well, trying to project myself and project thinking, okay, we can overcome this, or I can almost will this to happen, and we can't always do that. We have to assist them as much as we can, but at the end of the day, we have to understand everybody has a limit in their own potential. We like to believe we're limitless, but we all have our own limitations. It goes for me, it goes for you. It's so different for our children. So, we have to be accepting of that and understand that, just because we think they may be able to do something, they're ultimately going to be the determining factor in that. Not that they won't, but that they may not be able to. And it's not a truth that we have to accept. And then we have to do our best to move forward with knowing that it's not, it's at that point, I think knowledge is power. Once you know that and understand it, I think getting to the point where we reconcile it ourselves, that's where true acceptance comes from. When we understand it and accept it, okay, this is how it is. There's only so much I can expect of my child. We could. Not doesn't mean that we don't push them, but at the end of the day, they're only going to be capable of so much. We have to understand everybody has limitations. So, being understanding of that is, and having empathy is always important. So, Well, Jeaneen, it was wonderful speaking with you today. I really, I always love to hear. I mean, I speak with different therapists in the course of any given day, whether it's speech, OT, PT. So, I mean, I'm around pet professionals all day, but I always like to. I was intrigued by the name of your book, because everybody has their own opinion about how to do things, and I find I like your style. I think it serves children well. So, not that one is necessarily right or wrong over the other, but I think making them do more of the work is couldn't hurt. So
Yeah, I like to meet children where they're at, right? So you want to be able to scaffold their abilities and kind of pull back when you can. Like I would never expect a child who's nonverbal to speak in sentences, like you would never expect a child who cannot crawl to walk, you know? But you
yeah.
can meet them where they're at, and it's so rewarding to see children that are nonverbal and then become verbal and then see the reactions on the parents' faces when they're like, my child's talking now, or they're communicating, whether it is through words or in AAC. It's just very rewarding. And I think that if education for parents was increased, I think we could have a better outcome for these kids.
Well, that's great. It was a pleasure having you today. And just to remind everybody, the name of the book is Play Dumb and Sabotage by Jeaneen Tang, Jeaneen. My wife's name is Jeaneen as well, and she spells it differently. And after I've spelled her name so long, I have trouble spelling your name. There's like four different ways you can spell Jeaneen, and this one just isn't natural to me, but it's a pretty name. I appreciate you having coming on today. It's been a pleasure having you. That's going to wrap it up for the Autistic Mile. Until next time, remember, every mile matters. Take care, everyone.